Hey there, ho there, this is Nuts and Bolts, where we take a look behind the scenes of some of your favorite episodes of Anime Abandoned's past. Today we're looking at the review that I probably should have gotten back to in 2011. Yeah, this is kind of a long time coming, especially for somebody who knows exactly what Cyber City Oedo is. It's not like I haven't made references to it in previous videos, especially because that one infamous line pretty much encapsulates the entirety of the anime. That infamous, like you wouldn't know a vampire if it jumped up and bit you at the end of your goddamn dick line. It kind of took a life of its own, and that's what that anime was known for. And ever since the first episode of Anime Abandoned, I've been getting requests to do it. But for some reason or another, I just never gotten to it because I guess I had a feeling that there wasn't really much to that anime besides that line. And I felt like it was going to be it's just going to be leading to a very boring review. But I was actually very surprised and very surprised, and actually a very well-intentioned surprise that there was actually a lot more to it. And actually the anime itself was actually kind of good, actually legit good in that sort of 1980s, late 80s anime way. In that it's obviously aping from a lot of American, B movies and source material and such, but it does it in such a way that it's charming and you can groove to what it's trying to lay down. But I guess what the intention for starting this review in the modern day and then zapping back to 2011 was actually Mark's idea. His idea was that we could review it in that old style, in that old rinky-dink style that I used to shoot in, and it was actually kind of fun to try to reset up the shot to look exactly like that. Oh god, reliving that bat attack. Oh, and the piece de resistance, getting that 8-bit theater shirt. It was your insistence, Mark, that we get that shirt, but unfortunately, during the time where I first wore it in the first review, I had gotten rid of it because it was old and tattered and it didn't fit me right anymore. So we had to rebuild that shirt and what it looked like.
Which took about 20 minutes in one trip. But, like the point of it was that, we can go back to natural light. We can clear off the shelf. We can, we can try. But the thing is that, there used to be a time when Bennett used to wear shirts with actual logos on them, not just these blank shirts you most often see him in now, which has always been kind of my point of contention. Like, I fucking hate these blank ass pocket tees, just because they have no personality whatsoever. And it, if you listen to Toolshed, you always know that my position is that your nerd shirt is the secret handshake. So the question came up of do you still have that 8-bit theater shirt? No. All right, fine. Then I had to research where the font came from and then kind of recreate it in a PSD, which then, Bennett had gone out and had printed. And, it came out fine. And what this really amounts to is my favorite episode of Anime Abandoned. I have favorites, but it's, it is a love letter to where this all started. Because, the set has changed over time. That corner has changed over time to the point now where, we don't have the room for all the anime that we get donated and go out and buy for the schedule of the year. But, the very baseline of the set, it's always underneath there, that door, that chair, that shelf, always there.
Yeah, it's actually kind of purely from a video making perspective, it's actually very interesting to kind of deconstruct how I make the show by stripping away the bare, to the bare bones of it. And not even having the nice wall of DVDs behind me to basically show off, hey, I know what I'm talking about. Look at all this anime that I own. And just seeing me trying to carry a review just by myself. There was actually there was a part of me that wanted to edit this entire review worse, because, when I started back in 2011, I wasn't exactly the snappy editor that I am today, or snappier editor today, I should say. But on the other hand, I feel that the quality of the video should come first rather than the authenticity of the video. Because if I tried to edit this purposefully bad, the way I used to edit Anime Abandoned, then I don't think it would be necessarily a good, enjoyable watch, and only people like me and Mark and maybe the most hardcore of hardcore fans would get it. Of why is that take so long, or why is like there's extra frame of footage there when it shouldn't be. So, and that kind of humor doesn't exactly translate very broadly. But to the anime itself, Cyber City kind of surprised me by how good it was. Not to necessarily say it was great, but considering most of what I knew about the anime came from that line, I was picturing something way more violent and schlocky. But what I wound up getting was violent and schlocky, but with an underlying bit of charm to it. And that charm was its overly cursive script, for lack of a better term. The salty script was what really kind of endeared me to it. And I'm kind of of two minds when it comes to that, because on one hand, when you really, really try hard to be mature, it can be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Cringy, I suppose. Like, look how mature we are. We drop F-bombs all over the place. We don't care. But there's a certain sort of sweet spot where if you try so hard that it just winds up being hysterically funny and blatant, to me at least, from they actually thought this was going to sell.
Well, when we were going over it, like whenever it is that we go over some of the older stuff, the stuff that looks like this, just hand colored and just beautiful in the way that it looks still, just like despite the fact that it doesn't have the advantages of computer coloring and all the techniques that we use now to produce this sort of thing. We were just going over the sound of it, and it's just like, anime just doesn't sound like this anymore. And I said it in a way where it's like, oh, and I wish it still did, but I don't. We have armies of adaptation writers who try and make it so that that these things are relatable and that these characters sound like they're actually people. And even though we all know plenty of people that just use fuck as a comma, there's just something about that doesn't always perfectly translate into animation, and it comes off as trying too hard to make a character more salty than they should be, or more mature, like, this ain't for kids. So, I say that, God damn it, it just doesn't sound like this anymore. But, the thing is that, that's a good thing. And I can still go back and watch this stuff and just go nope, it doesn't sound like this anymore. And I'm glad that it doesn't, but it's nice to be able to go back and hear it and just kind of hear where we all came from. Because, stuff like Cyber City and Mad Bull, we'll cram, some joke in there about God, the sound of this particular performance. But overall, they're still pretty, they're still the anime that'll surprise you every once in a while, like Fist of the North Star. So, it's just really, because every time we do one, every time we do a nuts and bolts on an older anime that we did, I'm always just sitting there just starry-eyed, oh my God, it just doesn't look like this anymore. It doesn't sound like this anymore in my day,
Yeah, because even though the washed out color palette of the show isn't spectacular by any means, I mean, it has a very drab and very basic color palette, but you can tell from looking at the character designs and looking at the rather fluid animation, especially for its time, that this was not a cheap project. The people that worked on this really and earnestly believed in it. And when you really break down the stories, especially the third story, you realize that even when it's being violent and silly, there's still an earnesty that's going on. I mean, when you enter vampires into what was otherwise a purely sci-fi, futuristic, post-apocalyptic story, I assume post-apocalyptic, but when you insert vampires, it's always going to be, what in the world are you guys talking about? You have jumped the shark. What? Go back to square one. And yet I can't really summon up the bile that I could for a lesser show, I suppose is the word. And whether it be by virtue of the charm of the animation and the look of the show, whether it's the the like I said, the laughably awful dub script, there's a certain concoction being made between visual and audio that just hits a sort of sweet spot that I think a lot of people, especially people who grew up with the show, just come to have a special place in their heart for. I wanted to go back a little bit to talk about that the Evil Dead joke. I knew I had a moment that I should definitely make an Evil Dead joke, but then I remember, wait a minute, I'm going to have to pitch this script to Mark. And if I know Mark, he wouldn't settle for any Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2 clip. He'll go exactly for
for regeneration.
Yeah, regeneration to Mark. If we can have a little moment, is the best Evil Dead movie that we never got.
It is. Like, I like Ash versus Evil Dead. I do. I love it. And, you know, like, it's... I had to explain to a friend the other day that, you know, that pretty much everything that's ever had to do with Evil Dead says Army didn't happen. It's a rights issue and whatever. Just like, Army didn't happen. And that's fine, because, honestly, when Army was the only thing around, Army was great. But as more and more, like comics and Fistful of Boomstick and ultimately Regeneration happened, it's like, oh yeah, Army really wasn't that great, was it? Especially, you know, the U.S. cut versus the European cut. So... you know, like, if we can make that regeneration joke, like, we're going to make that regeneration joke, and honestly, like, I would say, go for it. You know, like, if you haven't played Evil Dead Regeneration, or you know, like, whatever, just, like, go find a copy on the PS2, or just watch a Let's Play. There's plenty of Let's Plays out there that cover Regeneration. Fantastic entry into overall Evil Dead as a franchise.
Yeah, and oh god, unfortunately we passed by our little clip of me back in 2007, which was actually a clip of me in 2008, but fudging details here. Oh, I debated with myself if I should have included that or not, because looking back on it, even ironically, is still very, very cringy to me.
Well, for everyone, it's cringy. Like, everybody looks back at their old footage and is like, oh god, if I knew now what I knew then. And it's like, yeah, but you wouldn't have had the same equipment, you wouldn't have had the same, like, you only would have had the same skills, but then you'd be limited by the equipment, the editing software at the time. Like, they're still, you know, like, Lewis, you know, he presents all of his old stuff very proudly, and he's just like, you know, like, we all came from somewhere, and he's right. You know, he's never ashamed of just going, like, here's the original history of Power Rangers, or here's really old episodes of Atop the Fourth Wall, you know, like, when he's got to, you know, kind of pimp reruns and stuff. Like, he always presents that stuff as, you know, equally valid. And, you know, like, and you go back through, you know, your old footage, and you're always like, oh god, Bennett then. And I'm just like, yeah, but, you know, Bennett then was learning to be Bennett now.
Yeah, I suppose. If there's a certain reality you have to contend with if you're going to make stuff for the public to look at in a very, very archival place like YouTube, where it's going to be there forever, whether you like it or not. You have to contend with the fact that you're going to look stupid in retrospect. Only the most foolhardy and just completely bereft of self-realization are able to look at what they did 3, even 2 years ago and not kind of quiver and just, oh.
Yeah, like, it's a constantly moving target, and, you know, that's a lesson that you can apply to yourself as you, the audience, yourself as someone trying to create anything, is that, you know, your current perfect is not going to be your perfect 3 months from now or even a week from now. So just roll with it. You know, make it as best you can, and then, you know, just know that as you continue to do it, you're just getting better at it anyway. I mean, you look at early anime abandons, they're naturally lit, they're in a different aspect ratio, the editing is different, everything's different. But now we go over everything with a fine-tooth comb, and, you know, it looks the way that it does now. And me personally, I don't look, you know, back at, like, old episodes of Anime Abandoned, you know, before we became friends, just go like, oh god, did Bennett need me? You know, it's that was never going to be something I ever would have the impetus to say. It's just like he did this much without me, you know, and like, it was all really impressive. Like, I didn't even start talking to Bennett until around Grave of the Fireflies. So,
Yeah, like I believe we said that the first script that you had any input on was actually, oddly enough, designed by the same guy who did Cyber City Oedo 808, Demon City Shinjuku. And comparing the two, they seem cut from the same cloth, doesn't it? Like if you go back to my Demon City Shinjuku review and look at Cyber City, they might as well exist in the same universe, just in terms of not only how the show looks, but also just in terms of style and just in terms of tone as well. Although Demon City Shinjuku was far more fantastical in its plot elements. If I could have a sort of aside here, and let's talk a little bit about Benson. Benson, to me, is sort of like the poster boy of the androgynous anime male. When everyone paints their stereotype of anime of having like pretty boys who look like they're women, but they're actually men, they're thinking of Benson. And I can't think of any better example or any more prototypical example of that trope and caricature. And yet Benson, to me, is kind of the best character, just in terms of he has other emotions other than constantly pissed off or yeah, exactly. He's the most well-rounded of the characters. Not that's any huge statement to make, because they're all pretty much caricatures, but at least Benson is more of a person than the other two. And I feel like Benson is the only one who actually has a kind heart at the end of the day. His story is about helping a woman. A woman he has never known. He's not a friend. He's not a former lover. She's not a former lover. Just a woman that he just felt compelled to help. Whereas the other two stories were about what was it? I called him B.A. Baracus, I believe, in the review. It was about helping a former associate of his, versus the first story is just like, shit, I got to do this or else my boss is going to blow up my collar and I'm going to die. So just by virtue of the fact that he wants to help gives him points more than any of the other three main characters.
Because he just doesn't really fit into everything else that's going on. Like he holds up the badass stick when he has to hold up the badass stick, but everyone else is 3 days from retirement and the mayor's gonna have my ass, and just
yeah, like in a world where every man is so obviously a man, and we're talking back in the glory days of manime, where every man had like this gigantic broad chest and like really really square cut jaw, and in comes Benson, who looks like he stepped out of a completely different anime.
Yeah, he's the Wallace Wells of this anime.
Actually, some of the women kind of have masculine features too.
That's just because this is before, this was made before anime shovel face. When I always refer to it as shovel face, when it's just just draw a spade, add eyes, there, shovel face. This is when they were still kind of striking the balance between how can we make something look stylized while still basing it on actual human anatomy. And you can see that just in the proportions, they're easily 5.5 to 6.5 heads tall, just things like that. Because really, this is where the look of the Spawn animated series came from. Just stuff like this is what ultimately became the creative visual direction of the Spawn animated series. So, and I would hope that when they reboot it eventually, that it maintains that look.
Oh, they've been barking up that tree for years. It's become the Duke Nukem Forever of the reboot project.
I don't care. It's so long as they do it and they get Keith David, I don't care.
Neither would I. I'll be the first in line with you when it comes to whether or not we're going to be seeing a continuation of it, or we're just going to start from scratch again. Either way. Another part of the script that I think really exemplified the series was its insistence on trying to be, whip crack smart with their comebacks. But there's just not enough writing talent to actually make them whip crack smart.
Yeah,
You know,
because well, it's because there's always going to be that writing tool, whether it's an adaptation or writing in general, where it's like if we make them quippy, that's writing. No, quips aren't writing. Quips are quips. Like if every character is quippy, then no one is actually smart. Everyone's of the same level of intelligence, like in Sorkin verse.
which is a discussion we've had plenty of times, especially in the discussion we had plenty of times. And speaking of discussion, I was under the impression, rather the wrong impression, of whether or not the Venom symbiote could be destroyed through sound waves or be disrupted by sound waves, whether or not that was comically canon or was that invented solely for the movie. And thankfully, Mark knows his Venom history more than anyone I know. The last thing I wanted to do was appear foolish and
I know it enough, but it's just like okay, let's just make sure that this joke is like. To see, the thing is, like, for as much as we get hammered for, like, you didn't do this right, did you even read this, did you even bother to watch this, it's like we are producing scripts in a very limited amount of time, which like part of the reason why it is that we have the break is not only so that Bennett can have a break, but it's also so that we can recover the script buffer, which is usually a buffer of about 3 scripts, which means that we're a month in advance, so that way if anything goes wrong, then we still have scripts in the can and we don't have to produce episodes a la carte. And in that time, like, whether we have the buffer or not, we still do try to cram in, like, is that right? Is this it? And we really do try to make sure that we're not talking straight out of our asses, because, like, we are kind of sort of educational and entertainment at the same time.
Edutainment, as it were.
Yeah, we skirt edutainment every once in a while. And generally speaking, we don't want to piss off the people who actually know, to the point where they're screaming. Like, it's like watching someone play a first-person shooter for you, where they just run in and Rambo into every situation, and you're just like, God damn it, just fucking sit behind the fucking wall and wait. We understand that that's the feeling. If we get something wrong, or if we don't include just enough information to be informative but not boring, that sometimes it can feel like somebody Ramboing in when you absolutely would not do that. And we do take that really, really seriously. I mean, we went on for 20 minutes just trying to figure out what the car Kusanagi was driving in Solid State Society.
Because it was obviously lifted from many, many sources, or at least what we thought was lifted from many sources. At one point, we thought it was a Noble, but no, after many minutes, we just said, oh no, it's an F430.
Yeah, it was just that the lighting was weird and the angle was weird, and it's like, okay, but yeah, it's got those little pips in the rear view, so, like, in the rear windscreen, like, okay, fine, that's it, it's a 430, let's go. But yeah, like, we take that sort of stuff seriously, because we know that shit is just infinitely fucking frustrating. Like, we still cop to the fact, it's like, no, we don't read the manga unless something's absolutely necessary. But for something like Iria, when it's like, yes, there's a live action film, this is a prequel, and that's the proper film of the franchise. Like, okay, well then let's watch the live action film and go.
Yeah, and I still feel that it's the only anime I've ever seen. If you saw the previous movie, you would understand less of what's going on, just by virtue of the fact that it's like, wait a minute, didn't you already establish this? Wait, that's not what you said in this movie. And if I had my way, I put more Judd Crandall references in the reviews.
Just an aside, like, the old joke used to be that in anime, blood in the human body is 100 times its actual volume and held under constant high pressure. And the other thing that I always found really funny was just, like, the amount of sliced meat that used to be in old anime. Like the dude just lost his arm, and it's like he doesn't even bleed. It's just a matter of, like, look at his innards. It's like,
look at these gigantic picnic hams. It's no surprise to hear that my favorite episode of the entire 3-run series is the 3rd episode, because not only is it about the best character, but it also has the best moments, not just the line. And no more is it more apparent than here in the cyber cat, the techno cat. What did I call them? Cybernetic saber cats, saber tooth tigers rather.
Yeah, like what was their point? Why are they here? Who? I mean, like first off, they're they're biological and cybernetic at the same time, so they had to clone a saber-toothed tiger somehow, and then roboticize it also, and it's just, Jesus Christ, like why? And it's just like because you want to know why? Because that's why. And decisions like that just don't get made anymore. Decisions like that have like you can't have creativity by committee and end up with decisions like that.
No, I mean, like when you really think about the villain whose main plan is to gain immortality through vampirism, strikes me as the kind of guy who would have cybernetic saber-toothed tigers guarding his place.
Yeah, because why not? And like another thing, just like the way that that machines are designed in this, like the big stilty robot that couldn't possibly have stilt legs that long, or the cars even. I'm just like, man, it all used to look like that. Like that was our vision of the future. Just everybody drives these vague looking Lambos.
Another thing that I miss is the washed out color that permeates all throughout the frame. Like when they were in the tunnel, everything was orange and black, and when like in this scene right here, where everything is kind of magenta and cyan, like everyone is of their same color palette, but it's always through this filter, this great looking filter.
Yeah, like the major difference is the difference between like feature film or feature television and soap opera. Like soap opera just has that, like old soap operas used to have that Vaseline filter with soft focus, and that's what a lot of these old anime can tend to look like, especially during daylight scenes, because they have to preserve all of their really dark, moody colors for their night scenes, because, you know, they need to have a blue sky at night, not a midnight blue sky, or else everything would just show up as Twilight of the Cockroaches.
Twilight of the Cockroaches it still remains the most unique anime that I have ever reviewed, just, you know, because certain sections of it was completely live action,
and the fact that you can't see anything.
And yeah, that too.
Look, is that the transfer? No, that's the movie.
They shot this in real lighting conditions. They didn't expose the shot properly, so they have to animate against that.
I love her hair. Just saying.
Oh. I'm agreeing with you. And the final fight scene, I wish I could show more of it, but I'd probably be dinged for content ID. But I love this ending fight scene so much because it ticks all my boxes for a ridiculous, fun final fight. Huge, unnecessarily gory death. Check.
Ridiculous regeneration sequence where it's like that was someone's job
to animate themselves, reformatting themselves from the ether, it seems. You know, tendon by tendon, sinew by sinew, they are just going to reform. And I love the fact that the way he's able to do this is just washed away with the fact that it's like, virus. You know, before we had the meme of nanomachine son, we had virus.
Yeah. Like just whatever. You know, it's like you are just a bunch of little germs. You're not even a person anymore. You're just a bunch of little germs that can reconstitute themselves whenever, especially in the vacuum of space. Like, yeah, sure, why not?
We know how to science. Do you? Is this like the third time that we made like a sort of Star Trek 2 joke with shoving Spock off into space in a capsule?
I don't know, it's somewhere in there. Like whenever it is that we can find the Star Trek through line, it's like, sure, let's go for it. Especially now that we've just, like used Lewis.
Yeah, we got Lewis on speed dial. Every time we need to make a Star Trek joke, it's just like, hey, get the guy who routinely keeps Star Trek uniforms on tap just so he can, pretend that he's part of the bridge or something.
Yeah, it's just perfect. Like, we don't have a lot of cameos anymore, but we can always depend on Lewis. He's a trooper.
He's like him and Doug. Oh, God. Brothers in arms when it comes to video making in that regard. Man. I feel that if I had reviewed this anime back in 2011, I probably would not give it its fair shake. Not because probably not because I wouldn't have liked it, but because I think that at that time I was more concerned with making the show entertaining rather than making the show honest about what it's covering. And if there's if there's a regret about my earlier episodes, I wish that I could go back to some of them and actually talk about a more honest viewpoint that I have instead of just trying to make cheap jokes and like, hey, isn't this stupid? So in that way, I'm glad that I waited until 2016 to talk about it.
Yeah, it was the greatest benefit, I think. Like this. All right, this gag, last minute gag, totally worth it.
Yeah, and I still have flecks of fake blood around my desk that have refused to clean up.
Oh my god. That's what it's going to be. You're going to move out of there one day, and it's just going to be, like just once go over with a black light. Wow, what is this murder scene? there's just what looks like spooge and blood everywhere.
Like some CSIT with a black light just hovering all around it, and one of them just says, "God, did this guy make YouTube videos or something?" We're nearing the end here of the episode, but before we go, I want to once again thank you all for joining us on another round of Nuts and Bolts, and another one is coming hopefully next week. But until then, till next time.
Take care.